inspires high performers to keep chasing that next big goal, even when the last one didn't bring the fulfillment they hoped for? And is it possible to stay ambitious without being ruled by old wounds or unmet needs? In this episode, I talk with Max Stevens, a developmental theorist who helps high achievers see how their own psychology shapes every outcome in their lives and businesses. Max shares why so many of us confuse business problems with personal growth challenges, and how early emotional pain often fuels relentless ambition in ways that leave us feeling empty. We explore what healthy high performance looks like, how to shift from achievement as a coping strategy to contribution to a mission, and why forgiveness, mortality awareness, and radical honesty are powerful starting points for real transformation. Max also offers fresh insights into how our actions ripple out far beyond us, influencing the people and systems around us in ways we might not realize. Thank you so much, as always, for listening. Welcome to the Impostor Syndrome Files. My name is Kim Meninger, and as an executive coach and former high-tech leader, my personal mission is to help professionals overcome imposter syndrome so that you can advance your career with confidence. Each week, I interview a new guest who brings a powerful perspective to this conversation, including personal stories, best practices, and new insights. The more we talk about this issue, the more we destigmatize imposter syndrome, recognize that we're not alone, and empower ourselves to access the tools and resources that can help us and those around us. Thank you so much for listening and for sharing with others you think would benefit from this conversation. Welcome, Max. It's great to have you here today. I'd love to start by inviting you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure, Kim. So my work, I'm a developmental theorist. So my work is founded on the view that the chokehold of any business is always the owner's personal psychology. And so rather than working with them on the business per se, although some of the conversations invariably will surface around those things, is that I work with them on them. So every business owner or high performer who works with me is after better outcomes in their life, whether that's in their business relationship, health, finances, etc. Outcomes in our lives are driven by our behavior. So the behavior that we choose to engage in, our behavior is driven by our decisions, as in what I decide to do. Our decisions are driven by our thinking, that drives our decisions, and then our thinking is driven by our worldview. And so the challenge, certainly as I see it for most high performers or most business owners at the least, is that they misdiagnose their own personal development problems as business problems. And so my work sort of sits at the intersection of those two things.
This is fascinating to me because I always wanted to be a therapist. That was what I grew up wanting to be. I ended up in the corporate world and I've been doing coaching. But that is one of the things that I think about a lot. I am not trained to address those issues, but I am keenly aware of exactly what you're describing. And I often joke that we think that when we're in the workplace, we're interacting with each other at a rational level, but oftentimes we're interacting with each other's triggered selves and a lot of the unfinished business, right, that we carry with us. So can you say more about, I want to dive into your brain and learn more about what they bring to you, how comfortable they are talking about these things? Because I know also sometimes business owners are a little reluctant maybe to get into some of the stuff that we're talking about. Maybe it feels in some cases like, well, that's not the quantifiable stuff, or that's going to distract me from the business side. So I'm curious, who comes to you and why?
Oh, yeah. So whether that's CEOs, athletes, high performers of various kinds, artists, even, yeah, like it's basically like people, high performers who are wanting to do better. And how comfortable are they? Well, I think like demonstrating that link that I just shared with you can be a very powerful way to enter into those conversations because it allows them to grasp that sort of linear chain of causation. I think the other thing that I also take them through, Kim, is particularly if they're a little bit more sort of skeptical, is let's say I'm dealing with a CEO. One of the things I'll be saying to them is, when you look at your leadership team or people in your organization, can you see very, very clearly that people are their own worst problem? They get in their own way in some way, they self-sabotage in some way, they trip themselves up in some way, they're too hard on themselves in some way, they are their own worst problem. And the business owner will go, oh, yeah, definitely. I can see that easily. And I'll say, right. And then when we look back throughout human history and we see all of the crazy things that we've done to each other, all in the name of, believing that we were doing good, um, can you see that we seem to have a propensity to um, self-deceive, and get in our own way? Oh yeah, definitely, I can see that. I say, right, and even if we bring this closer to home, say we look at your spouse, your children, your parents, can you see that they get in their own way in some way? And they'll go, oh yeah, definitely. And I'll say, right, but not you. And I'll say, right, so how are you the only person who's transparent to themselves? So the notice, like from a first person perspective, when I look out at the world, I can see that people are their own worst problem, and you probably can too, right? And your listeners probably can too. But notice from my position, when I look out at the world, it doesn't look like I'm my worst problem. It looks like the world is my problem in some way. Yeah. So, but notice when I go and ask anybody out in the world, what's your worst problem? People don't say themselves. They say the world just like I do. So what are the chances that I get in my own way just like they're getting in their own way, and I can't see it just like they can't see it? And so that then provides some sort of entry point into those conversations, which allows a greater degree of openness in the high performer.
That's a really good way to get them to you. I could see the sort of trap that you were thinking for them. Uh, do you find that there are specific areas in which they get in their own way that you tend to focus on? Are there themes that recur?
Yeah, definitely. So the challenge for the archetype of the high performer is that the high performer's journey is normally born of pain. It's born of pain or some sort of feeling of some sort of sense of inadequacy that they've been made to feel quite, sort of earlier in their lives. And the challenge is that they are essentially seeking an external outcome to allay or heal that sort of internal pain point that they experienced in their lives. And this is like the classic case of the insatiable high performer who can never be happy in spite of what they achieve. It's like, well, why is it exactly that they can never be happy? Well, they can never be happy for exactly what I said. The problem is what happens is that they have this like emotional fracture like earlier in their lives when basically high performance or the desire to achieve becomes a compensatory strategy. It becomes a strategy to compensate for that emotional pain that they're in. And so it's often the case that the thing that is driving their success is dysfunctional. And so what that ends up leading to is, well, fundamentally, they're under the presupposition that if I can just get here, if I can just achieve this thing, whatever this thing is, promotion, increase revenue in the business, etc., then I'll be able to accept myself. I'll be all right. But the thing that they often don't understand is it's not even the increased revenue or the achievement. It's none of that they're after. What they're actually after is the end of that feeling that they have about themselves. And so what happens is they go on this chase, like to achieve whatever this thing is. Let's say it's increased revenue in the business. Then, when they achieve that, they experience a temporary allaying or they experience temporary solace from that feeling of inadequacy. And they go, oh, that's nice, right? But very, very quickly, what happens is that feeling begins to reconvene back on itself. It begins to reorganize itself, and they can feel it again, and they misunderstand or misappropriate that feeling returning as, but that's just because I haven't achieved this yet. And they get caught on this in this like infinite regress. Yeah, like I have one client of mine, he comes to mind, who I've just started working with, runs a $350 million business. And I said, like, what's the goal? And he said, oh, we have to get to 500 million in 2 years' time. Like it's like this endless game that they're caught in. But the thing he doesn't realize as well is like again, he's not after the revenue. He's after the end of that feeling. And so the challenge becomes, well, the recurring theme, I should say, is that the thing that is driving that success is often dysfunctional. And so that's sort of where my work starts with them.
So I want to ask a question because I'm sure there are people listening who are wondering this as well. You talked about this in terms of high performers. Is there such a thing as a healthy high performer? Like, can you be
Yep.
driven without wanting to allay, an unmet need or from the past?
Yes, I mean, in my experience, they're very rare. But yep, so like one of the, so okay, great question. So look, the distinction between like healthy expressions of high performance behavior and less healthy expressions of high performance behavior fundamentally comes down to, at least in my mind, what we call our circles of concern. So when we look all throughout, like one of the things I have been really shocked at, Kim, is whenever I have asked coaches, personal development practitioners, just people in our space. And I say, what is the actual point of personal development? Like, what are we actually doing when we're developing ourselves? And what is it that we're developing ourselves into? And I've been shocked that so many people in our space essentially say, oh, just like set and achieve goals and being a winner and stuff like that. Like they have no sense of what the actual point of personal development is. So personal development fundamentally began as philosophy. Like philosophy is like the original sort of personal development back in the sort of ancient Greek sort of period where people like Aristotle and Plato and etc. who are concerned with like right living. What is the right way for us to live? Then we had like Marcus Aurelius, you had Stoicism, like you have all these like sub schools of basically epistemology, like how human beings make sense of the world. So philosophy, and whether that also encompasses even theology and religion, and all the way through to developmental psychology, all point to the same truth, or the same axiom, which is that the purpose of personal development is what's referred to as self-transcendence,
Mm.
right? Which is so if we look at philosophy, they'll talk about self-transcendence. If we talk about it at a religious or theological level, they'll talk about like becoming one with God, or transcending the devil and all that sort of stuff. And then when we talk about developmental psychology, we're basically speaking about expanding our circle of concern. So at lower levels of development, basically put very, very simply, we're more selfish. We're more concerned with like me, and what's best for me. At higher circles of concern, what happens is that circle of concern expands to me and my family. Then me, my family, my friends, my community, my countries, all people within all countries, all cultures, all animals, all environment, and the cosmos, etc. And so, like, you can tell, like, one of the things I say to clients all the time is like, you can tell how much you are growing essentially by how selfless you are becoming.
Mm.
Yeah. If you are still like caught up, like a big problem, certainly as I see it in Western culture, is personal development has become like really weaponized. And so what happens is that we have a lot of people who are still as selfish as ever, just now armed with like personal development distinctions, around like limiting beliefs or, just nonsense. And so, um, and so back to the healthy or unhealthy expressions of high performance. Like less healthy expressions of high performance is like I am trying to allay a feeling of pain that I am in through the acquisition of achievement. A more healthy expression of high performance is I'm okay as I am. Yeah, my work is now about trying to make the world better. So it's a more like contribution focused, like the classic distinction in business is there's like missionaries and mercenaries. So missionaries are like, I am on a mission to make the world better. The business is a means to help me achieve that mission, versus a mercenary, I am in this for me. Yeah, and there are certain things that I want, and the business is there for me to help me achieve what I want for me. And so like that's a very, very easy distinction because the question becomes invariably, well, why do you need all those things or why do you want all those things? And a big part of the reason why they want all those things is because life is not all right as it is. But if I can achieve all those things, then I can accept myself, which is sort of that hedonic treadmill idea that I was speaking about before.
So that makes a lot of sense to me. One thing that comes up for me as I think about this is that you've got a lot of these high performers concentrated in systems, right? And so
Yes.
when you think about treating one of them, do they have to remove themselves from that environment? How do they continue? How do they sort of heal? and stay in an environment that may perpetuate a lot of those expectations or behaviors.
Definitely. Like it's often like quite a breakthrough session, when they eventually turn to me and go, "Well, why am I doing any of this then?" Like, and I said, "That's a great question. Why are you doing any of this then?" And so, the world in some ways is a mirror for our internal experience, and so one of the things I talk about a lot with like a huge problem that I have with sort of goals-based coaching or like goals-based, I'll be your accountability buddy sort of coaching is so if I work with somebody over a year, right, and we set goals a year out, and say like, okay, these are our big targets that we're working towards. By the time we get there, if we've both really done our jobs and been a good team, you're actually not the same person when you arrive as the person who set those goals in the first place.
Mhm.
And so one of the sort of hallmarks that I sort of listen for is when we have to start readjusting the program, like that's when I know that the work is really working because it speaks to the idea that their vantage point hasn't changed. I was working with a rather disagreeable, like we get along really well. So, for anyone who gets offended at what I say, please understand that it was said in good faith, in good context, but he was sort of saying, well, Max, I go through life with no regrets. And I said, well, you're an idiot, because it speaks to the idea that your vantage point hasn't changed. Like the need to forgive myself is actually a symptom that I have grown. Like when I look back even at who I was a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago, and I go like, oh God, I don't know what I was thinking there. Like maybe I should go and say sorry for those things. Like that's a good thing. Like that's actually a symptom that my vantage point has changed. If I look back and go, yeah, I do it all the same, it's like, well, your vantage point hasn't changed, or so it
Haven't
would seem.
grown. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, yes, invariably those questions do surface. So there's normally like one of two things that happens. Normally they either change their environment or they reorient the mission or the meaning that they have that's associated with what they're currently doing.
So they can reorient themselves to similar work and still and have a healthier relationship with it.
Yeah, yeah, they can. Like, yeah, they can. So it normally just comes down to um reorienting myself in terms of what I can contribute rather than what I can get for me. So they
Hmm.
start to spend more time with their team. They start to spend more time with their clients, things like that. It becomes less about, well, fundamentally, it just becomes less about themselves.
If for people listening, and I sort of have this, I'm at a crossroads with which path to go down in my questioning right now. I'm thinking about people who are probably seeing themselves in what we're talking about. And I'm wondering, is there step one here?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things I talk a little bit about in my book is that there's certain um, how do I explain this? Okay. So like when we're starting to speak about the conversation of like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? What is a meaningful life to me? There's like epistemic and by epistemic, I just mean like how we make sense of the world. There's work to be done in terms of putting our feet on really solid ground to take steps towards working on ourselves. And so the first place I always start with clients is notice that a lot of your desires are what are referred to as mimetic, which basically means that we inherit them. We inherit them from our culture, we inherit them from our family, we inherit them from emotional pain points. So we're sort of living in reaction to, like the human animal is a communal creature. So we live like in response to our tribe and our environment. And so there's three sort of like easier steps, yeah, that people can go through. Well, easy in name at least. Simple is a better word than easy. And the first is forgiveness. So the principle of forgiveness in my mind is that what it allows us to do when we go through all of the people that we feel that we have wronged and who have wronged us is what ends up happening. Like I can't tell you how many business owners I have worked with, and they'll come to me in the first session And they'll say, right. And I'll say, okay, what's the goal? Why are we here? And they'll say, to double the size of the revenue in the company. And I'll go, okay, why do you want that? Like, you could have asked me for anything. Like, why that? And they'll say something like, so I can prove to all those people who said I couldn't do it that I can. And I'll say, well, don't you think it's a better idea and a better use of our time if you just forgive those people? Like, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of effort to prove people wrong who probably don't even think about you anymore, who probably just said this in an offhanded way. So and it's not just like it's a very stark example, right? But there are so many experiences within our lives that we are essentially living just in reaction to. Like, I'm trying to prove that I'm worthy of my love to my dad. I'm trying to prove whatever. Like, and so like forgiveness is a really, really good place to start. The second place to start the second really, really good place to start is just an awareness of my own mortality. So just notice that like we're not here forever. We're here for a very, very, very short while. And for some of us, we're already a third, if not half, if not two-thirds of the way through our lives. So the idea that in my mind, it's very, very helpful to reflect on that because it really disabuses me of the idea of a few things. Number one is that I'm important and I'm not. Number two is that in the grand scheme of things, I matter and I don't. And then number three is that there is a safe road in life, and there's not, because the safe road and the unsafe road lead to the same place. So, we might as well have an epic adventure while we're here. And so that is a really, really helpful distinction as well. So it's like, let me forgive and get free of my past. Let me be aware that I'm not here forever. And then the third piece is around like in my mind, it's what I call radical honesty, which is the idea like, okay, if I'm going to build a life that's mine and not mimetic and not inherited, then best I be really, really honest with whose voice is that when I say that I want these things. So if I say, I want a big house or I want a fancy car or I want this or I want that, it's like, is that you talking or is that like your culture talking? Do you actually want that? And so those three sort of axioms are a good place to start from a personal development perspective before we get into the purpose conversation and what you actually want to be doing.
I have a maybe seemingly cynical question for you. Like, is our culture
Cynical is good.
is our culture built for this kind of sort of work? I feel like it takes
Mhm.
a lot of self-discipline and a lot of sort of, I don't know what the word is, willpower to overcome so many of the external variables that
Yeah,
keep us locked in this state that you're describing.
yeah, sure. So one of the things that is one of the things in my mind that becomes very, very clear is that human beings are animals, right? And we have like intrinsic human needs. This is a big problem, certainly within our culture, as I see it. um, Kim, is that we have this like pride in our individualism, which is that we're all just individuals, man. And things that work for you may not work for me, and things that work for me may not work for you. And that's all nonsense. Like, it's complete nonsense. If you take any other species, you take dogs, for example. Yeah, like dogs have inherent dog needs. Dogs can have different personalities, even different preferences to some degree, but they're all still dogs. And then the question becomes like, okay, well, what do dogs need? And it's like walks, food, play, affection, right? You deny any dog these needs, yeah, and dogs suffer. Yeah, like, and why do they need those things? Based on their evolutionary history. And so then the question becomes like, okay, well, what is the evolutionary history of humans and what do humans need? And fundamentally, when we look at our evolutionary history, anywhere from tens to hundreds of thousands of years, right? The beginning of human history is much debated, but even if we just say on the shorter side, so tens of thousands. So for tens of thousands of years, yeah, our ancestors lived in tribes in the forest. And your quote unquote success measure obviously wasn't your bank account. It wasn't even what you could get for you. It was the contribution that you made to that tribe. Did you go and get the berries? Did you go and catch the fish? Did you go and hunt that animal? And if you did, you could bring back your spoils and you'd be celebrated within your tribe. Yeah. The problem is, that was all well and good. And then we had as these tribes grew bigger and bigger, they started to encroach in one another's territory. We had tribal warfare, and then when we transcended that sort of level of development, then we had the arising of larger communities, yeah, and what we call like city states, yeah, like real basic like communities. And trade was largely done on the basis of utility. So like you have some sheepskin, I have some eggs. I want the sheepskin, you want the eggs, why don't we swap? Yeah. So like it was done on the basis of survival and utility. Again, that was all well and fine, essentially until the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution basically produced a mass surplus of goods. Yeah, so we had more goods than we knew what to do with. And so then like the powers that be had a very interesting question, which was like, hmm, we've got everyone's survival needs met. How do we start convincing people to buy more than what they actually need? And
Mm.
so began the rise of advertising. And so now in 2025, like certainly in Western countries, like trade is no longer done on the basis of utility. Trade is now done on the basis of identity. So in other words, what does it mean? We no longer buy things for the purpose of utility. We buy things for the purpose we buy things for what it means about me to own it. So like let's take an example like a Gucci scarf, right? A luxury item like a Gucci scarf or a Louis Vuitton scarf, right? I when I buy that scarf, I'm not buying the fabric. I'm buying the story of what it means about me to own that thing, which is that I'm sophisticated, I am elegant, I am successful, I am whatever, right? Insert whatever the story is.
Mhm.
The problem is that that scarf says those things only until next year's scarf is released.
Yes.
And then what happens is the same scarf that I am wearing now no longer says elegance, sophistication, or success. It now says that I'm falling behind, but it's the same scarf. And
Mm.
so the story that we're after is not fixed to the item. It leaps from item to item, you see? And so we're off on this chase, like, and this is consumerist culture in a nutshell. We're off on this chase where we're chasing a story rather than chasing anything on the basis of utility anymore. Like there's nothing that is more warm about that scarf. There's nothing that is inherently better, quote unquote, or more useful about that scarf. It's a story that I'm after, right? And so, okay, so why is this a problem? Well, fundamentally, what has happened over the course of like, and it hasn't been very long. It's only the last like 150 years, is even less, 120 years, is we have now curated environments that now no longer match our evolutionary wiring.
Mm.
There's literally a part of our brains called the anterior cingulate cortex, which is responsible for like dopamine and serotonin and the feel good feels. Yeah. And that part of the brain gets stimulated the most when we do something good for somebody else. Like, and that's not a mistake. That's not like woo-woo new age. That's like your evolutionary survival mechanism of the brain, which is like if I contribute to the tribe, my survival chances go up because then the tribe is stronger and we're collectively better together. But what's happened is like now we're now living in environments that are out of sync with that. So we're becoming more and more fractionated and more isolated from one another. And our tribe has been fractured down in so many and divided in so many different ways. It's getting divided by gender, it's getting divided by race, it's getting divided by creed, it's getting divided by religion, it's getting divided by, socioeconomic status, it's getting divided by so many different ways, right? And so this is the problem. And this, in my view, is why we have the mental health crisis. It's why we have the crisis of meaning. It's why we have the loneliness epidemic, because we are fundamentally living out of sync with our own evolutionary wiring. It would be like dogs living in a way, like organizing their dog society, or organizing their pack, in a way where they don't have walks, food, play, and affection anymore. And it's like, and then they start to get emotionally, and almost psychologically sick. And we go like, oh, well, how come that's happening? It's like, well, it's obvious why that's happening. It's like you're not living in accordance with what you are. And this is the thing certainly in our culture as I listen to that's a big problem is the whole like, well, we're all just individuals, man, is not true. Like it's nonsense. It's just like it's a cultural narrative.
Mm. It's so what you're saying feels so real and it's so frustrating because it feels so excuse me difficult to navigate it in a more healthy and functional way. But obviously, it's worth it, right? I mean, what do you see in the people that you work with? You see dramatic changes?
Yep. Yep. Definitely. Definitely. Like, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I would say that they found uh, happiness for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that generally somebody who tries to be very optimistic, and I believe that it's worth it to take control of what you can control, right? We can't control the society that we live in, but we can control how we respond to it and how we, navigate it. And so it sounds like that's what you're encouraging us to think about too. Is, I mean, we can't take off the weight of the world, but we can sort of address our own experience.
Yeah. Well, one of the ideas which is useful to think about is the idea of what's called an emotional contagion. So, so there's like a famous study at Harvard. People can look this up. They can fact check me here. Is where basically they were looking at how our emotions ripple throughout our community. And so the idea is that an easier way to think about it is ripples rather than an emotional contagion, which is that um, our actions and our basically the transfer of our emotional state ripples 3 degrees of separation away from us. So, for example, let's say I get off this call today with you, Kim, or this podcast recording with you. I say, wow, Kim was just great. Like, what a great, nourishing, awesome conversation. And it picks up my spirits. The next person that I deal with feels that,
Mm.
whoever that is. And that person then hands it on to somebody else. So if anyone who's listening has seen the movie Pay It Forward, it's like it's a good example of this, right? And so the idea is it normally ripples about 3 degrees of separation. So you contribute to me, Kim, I give it to somebody else, and they give it to somebody else, and normally it sort of dilutes itself by that stage, right? So I work with, something in the neighborhood of 35 high performers each week, right? But I know that I work with at least 90 people every week because I know that my actions will ripple outwards, through them. And so you're a lot more powerful than you realize. If you speak with 50 people a day, it's over 150 people that you're having an impact on, positive or otherwise. And so that can be a useful way to think about it in terms of what your, you know, responsibility to the expansion of consciousness is, if you like.
Yeah, and I think even influence on the environment around you too, which is really helpful because I think about it in the context of workplaces where, there's often this perception, which is true to some extent, that a lot of culture is driven from the top, but there are a lot of subcultures too, and I think leaders can sort of influence their own subcultures by doing exactly what you're just describing and deciding how they want to show up, and that in turn affects the people around them.
Agreed.
Yeah. Oh goodness, Max, this is so fascinating. I truly could stay here all day. But I know you wrote a book, and I know you do this work. So I would love to invite you to share how people can stay in touch with you or continue to follow your work, find your book.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So they're welcome to go to maxstevenscoaching.com. So Stevens spelled with a PH. Yeah, if they want to have a chat with me, they're welcome to find me there.
Wonderful. Well, I'll make sure the links are in the show notes. And thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Pleasure. Thank you too.
Thanks so much for listening to the Impostor Syndrome Files. If you would like to continue this conversation in a safe and trusted space, I would love for you to join my virtual discussion group every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. For the past several years, the group has been limited to women, but it is now open, regardless of gender, to anyone who is interested in exploring and troubleshooting common workplace challenges, building better awareness of ourselves and others, and becoming more inclusive allies at work. Check out the show notes for more info on how to find us, and please join us next week for another episode of the Impostor Syndrome Files.